Hello and welcome to Charlie's Desk. A long time since I made a video, so I'm excited to be back. Today on the desk, I have two items visible on the screen. One is an invitation to a graduation for the Illinois School for the Blind from 1912. And I'm going to get into the interesting things about this. And the other is the book The Unseen Minority by Francis A. Koestler, A Social History of Blindness in the United States. And I'm going to be referencing that and some other things. I do have my computer off to the left with some tabs open because, today's subject is really embossed font, embossed writing, which just basically means raised paper that you can feel. And so I've mentioned in other videos how there were other tactile types, tactile reading and writing methods that existed contemporaneously with Braille. And so there was these competing types, and one of the most widely used was called Boston line type. And this was developed by Samuel Gridley Howe, the first director of what was then the Perkins Institute for the Blind. And he had traveled Europe, and he had checked out the work of this guy in Scotland named Gall. Was it Thomas Gall? Let me check that right now. Yeah. So on the desk is an example of that, and I'll just read the text of what it says on the first page. There are 3 pages. This thing is like, I don't know, 4x7, little pamphlet. Okay, so it is the Illinois School for the Blind, graduating exercises, Tuesday afternoon, June 4th, 1912, 2 o'clock. Class of 1912 lists of graduates: Riley G. Cattle, Harold J. Conrad, Klaus F. Memenge, Ruth M. Needle, Irma G. Smith, and Maud M. Varley. And so it's printed in Boston line type, and it's just Roman letters. They're a little bit more angular. They have both caps and lowercase. And so one French philosopher who was blind himself, Pierre Villet, put it that sort of these linear types, we're trying to talk to the fingers in the language of the eye. So one of the drawbacks of this, ironically, it was very difficult to read Boston line type because you had that problem of speaking to the fingers in the language of the eyes. But despite that, it was prevalent throughout the country for a long time, past Samuel Gridley Howe's death even. Part of this is because the printing apparatus was incredibly expensive. So when I examine very closely this invitation, it is possible to sort of determine that there are these little rectangular light imprints around the text. And that's because the printers would kind of snap together all these sort of metal strips of letters and sort of clamp them in and then run that through the printing press. So it was pretty elaborate. You had to have, all these letters or make them and then put them together. So they invested a lot in these printing houses, and most schools for the blind in the country, and there are a lot of them, had their own dedicated printing presses for educational materials. And so I was mentioning earlier that there were a bunch of different kinds of competing texts. and they really were competing. So they were all existing at the same time. So sort of you had Boston line type coming up from Boston, and then I wonder who I have it, but the person who brought Braille to America worked at the Missouri School for the Blind, and so that was kind of where it spread. So really kind of from the South. Here. I'm just gonna like flip through to see if I can find the mention of this. Oh yeah, in Dr. Simon Pollock in 1854, one of the founders of the Missouri School for the Blind was traveling Europe, and that's when he learned about Braille and brought it back home. So he's really should get the credit for bringing Braille to America, Dr. Simon Pollock. The only thing is, and you can even see it in this invitation when I open the page, the inside is printed in what looks like Braille, right? It's dots. So, okay, we have the cover, that's Boston line type. And then on the inside, in the same document, there is a different tactile type. I'll just kind of center it so both are there. So that's confusing, first of all, as a student to have to learn so many different types. There was also a moon type. There was William Waite's project, which is New York Point. You know, and if you were to read this document as a reader of UEB, it would make no sense because it's not, you know, British Braille, which was, you know, used the same ordinal sequence of dots as French Braille and added some letters like W. This is American Braille. So American Braille was one of the competitors. I mean, it was like Braille, but Joel W. Smith, a blind piano tuning teacher at Perkins School for the Blind, introduced American Braille in 1878. It was called Modified Braille, and then it was changed later to be American Braille. And so we got to remember, when he is inventing this, the primary method of writing Braille that was available is the slate and stylus. So this guy thought, oh, okay, well, my idea is I'm going to sort of reconfigure the alphabet so the least number of dots are used for the most common letters, and this will speed up writing with the Braille and slate. But then it's just totally confusing to the modern reader. So take the word state here. So it reads, and it has text below for the people who were at the graduation. You are cordially invited to attend the graduating exercises of the State School for the Blind at the chapel of the institution, Jacksonville, Illinois, Tuesday afternoon, 2:30, June 4th, 1912. So let's just take a simple word, the word state. Okay, the capitalizing symbols is .3, .6. So, and then S is represented by the letter K, and then B, and then A is the same, and then B again because T is B, and then for E, it looks like it is just dot 2. So it's weird and confusing. Like school is spelled Kjheel. So some of the letters are the same, some are different. It's very weird. It's American Braille, invented by a piano tuning teacher at Perkins, and that was like a big vocational program, piano teaching. So right now I have the invitation taking up the full screen. So on the left-hand side there is American Braille, and on the right side on the right-hand side is the text written in Boston line type. So just within their little printing shop, they had the capability to do these two different texts. And this is, whoops, well, my camera almost fell over, right? So this is 1912. This is 20 years after Frank Haven Hall, who was the superintendent of that very school, invented the Hall Braille Writer, which was the first practical Braille writer that increased speeds and eliminated the need, really, for everybody to be using a slate and stylus. There was another option. So it's like, this is 30 plus years later. They're using American Braille at the school where they invented the Braille Writer because it's faster for writing with slates and stylus. And they're also using Boston line type. So, you have to sort of ponder what are the motives here. One of the things was always in favor of the linear type systems is it was easy for sighted people to read because it just looks familiar to, how we normally read. And that was a big issue for teachers at various schools where Braille was being adopted. It was difficult for these sighted teachers to read. So there was a competition aspect there. But if you think about donors and stuff, it's very understandable to them. Like, oh yes, the letters are raised. And that's how the blind will read. So that, is possibly useful to the school because all of these institutions, in addition to state funds, like private donations were incredibly important. Yeah, so you have this little invitation and it has two different sort of formats there. And the last page is just the program, what people are gonna say. It sounds like there was some pretty nice music, some Verdi and Schechner and Haydn, a lot of Haydn. So, music was a big focus of schools for the blind back then. But this is I thought this was a great artifact because it really gives a sense of how mixed together it all was back more than 100 years ago. Okay, yeah, I think I talked myself out here. Thanks for watching Charlie's Desk. If you like this kind of content, definitely subscribe, and I will periodically be producing videos that just kind of go into sort of the history of blindness and innovations related to blindness, and try and sort of get in the door through objects and artifacts like this. So I hope y'all have a nice day and catch you later. Bye.